Hey team, pardon the t-shirt. Was just on an on-site with a customer down in DC and had my suit, and I wanted to take it off before driving, so it's hanging in the back and I'm just in sweats and a t-shirt driving home. But anyway, wanted to check in with everybody and really talk about how you identify risk at your business. So wherever you are in the business, you are encountering some kind of risk. It may be reputational risk, with customers and with the public. It may be a financial risk. It may be, there's a lot of different risks that are going on. There may be risk to your staff. There may be physical security issues. There may be, problems with staff getting headhunted by competition, or cultural problems, and the risk is staff leaving, etc. So let's focus in on financial risk, because that's really what the business is driven on. All these other things are factors to the business, culture and employees and, risk to reputation. But if you think about the business as like a machine, and it's really worried about money. Everything else, reputation, everything, it only cares about reputational risk because it cares about money. It only cares about employee risk because it cares about money. Like, everything else about a business is only focused on making money and giving a return to the shareholders. That's the purpose of a business. Now, so if we think about frame everything in a financial risk, it seems unfair. Hey, our risk is that, our customers won't love us as much, but that's really, like I said, the business is only really caring about the end effect on its money. So, if the business is going to still be wildly successful making money and everyone hates it, the business is not incentivized to change that image. There's no reason for the business to change how it's viewed. Anyway, financial risk. Let's frame everything in the eye of financial risk. Now, everything you deal with has some level of risk to it. And it's up to you to decide whether that risk is tolerable, or something you need to put some other control around. And that's what you're doing with every risk. You have to identify it. You have to decide whether what the impact of that risk is going to be, and then whether it's something you accept because the probability or cost of that risk is so small that it doesn't matter, or it's a risk that you put a control around. And so you're putting a mitigating factor around that risk. Now, some risks people don't really, you don't want the risk, you don't want to accept the risk, but you also don't have money to mitigate. So you don't have any controls to put in place. You don't have skilled people to put those mitigating controls, etc. in place. So all you're doing is saying, okay, I really hate that we have these old computers that are all end of life, but they're running our business, and we, so I want to replace them, but I don't have budget to replace them right now. So then, are there any mitigating controls? Well, we don't have the skill set to put the mitigating controls in place, whether it be isolation or segmentation or additional monitoring or whatever, advanced monitoring solutions. And so you're in this place where you don't want to accept that risk, but you also are in a place where you can't do anything about it right now. And I've recently dealt with some of these situations regarding staff, where it's you need more people, in order to give better customer service, obviously. So there's a risk behind not doing that. If you don't have more staff, then your customer service could suck and you lose customers. And when you lose customers, you lose money. And so not hiring one person could affect you in a big way if you lose large customers. So, let's say that's a risk you don't want to accept. You want to do something about it. You want to hire more people. But you have no budget. You have no money to do it. So you're in a place where you're kind of stuck between risk acceptance and mitigation. So I call that almost temporary acceptance. You have to kind of accept it and for the time being and just say, I'm going to address this later. It's an addressable risk for later. So what should you do with these risks? You should have some kind of risk register where you're identifying them, weighing them, giving that value and the probability of it being business impact, and then accepting the risk or deciding a mitigation plan. And sometimes that mitigation plan is a couple of years down the road, in that temporary acceptance idea. Yeah, it could be a couple of years down the road. So you want to accumulate these risks, and there's thousands of risks that your organization has. Every person, every step you take, there's risks. So identifying the key ones and all the real risks to your organization, you want to try to identify and put in that risk register. So how do you identify what's a risk? So there's, different nomenclature here between an attack, a threat, a risk, etc. So to me, a risk is something that can happen, but isn't right now. It's a negative consequence. It's something that has a negative consequence along with it. And it's something that could happen, but is not necessarily happening right now. So it's like, if you eat poorly, you have an increased risk of heart disease, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and diabetes. Those are risks. So when you're in the business and you're picking a vendor to do your credit card processing, there are risks associated with this. Pardon the yawn. So think about the risks associated with credit card processing. Okay, you're swiping your customers' cards, and you're giving your customers' card data, to this third party to process. And then what if they're breached? What if that data in transit is breached? Are customers coming to you? Yes. You're the vendor that, you're their customer. You are their supplier. They're your customer. They're not your card swiper's customer. You can then turn around and sue your, card processor, but that's a risk. Let's say that, the customer then leaves you and things like that. There's all these outcomes that can happen as a result of that kind of breach. So there's some when you're weighing that risk, there's some value, there's some financial weight behind that. Something that, an impact that could happen. Fines, fees, class action lawsuits, legal stuff, customers canceling contracts and canceling services with you. There's a lot of things negatively God, the yawns that are there, so there's certainly a lot of potential risk involved with a credit card processor. Now, there's other stuff too. There's risks that they can change your rates, which has a financial impact. There's a chance that they have a chargeback policy that's different than other carriers, and you could get, what if you get three black chargebacks and then they stop processing credit cards for you? Things like that may be contractual risks. And what are you going to do for your transactions until you get another credit card processor on board? So what's your mitigating factor? Your mitigation there is, okay, have a second credit card processor that may be not as favorable rates, but is a backup in case the first one stops processing credit cards for you. And then set up a mechanism to be able to switch credit card processors on the back end. So there's a lot of things like this, but that's just talking about picking a credit card processor has several risks behind it. So when you're managing that risk, doing due diligence behind those credit card processors, think about what is your breach risk, what is their security like, what is, how is your data getting to them? Are they retaining what is happening there? And then thinking about your contractual risk along with that. What is the operational impact if you get chargebacks and they decide to stop processing credit cards for you? Things like that. Like, what are the worst case scenarios here? What if they're down? What if they're impacted and they get ransomware? What's the risk there to your operation? So you can think about this with every vendor you have, every supplier, every third-party contractor. But risks like that extend to within the organization. So let's say you're not talking about a vendor. Let's say you're talking about your maintenance process for, let's do a janitorial process. Let's say about when you're washing, mopping, sweeping, mopping, and polishing floors. There's risk along there that, someone could trip and fall, and hurt themselves, that there's a negative impact on traffic flow through your building. If you're a high traffic building, negative impact on customers if customers come into your organization. So figuring out when and how to handle that, so you're not blocking off a whole hallway, but so you're mitigating the risk of somebody falling and then a lawsuit and things like that. So identifying risk is something that needs to become natural to you in cybersecurity and leadership, especially in leadership, but in cybersecurity it can be really with anything, and in leadership it can be with anything. There's risks associated with everything. Consequently, if you're into project management is ultimately a discipline about managing risk when executing a project. So there's risks involved in everything, and it's important to keep your eyes out for potential negative consequences and then figure out what's the probability of them. Because you don't want to spend a lot of resources mitigating a risk that has a very low probability or impact. Even if it's a high probability, but it doesn't matter. Like, it may not be worth spending effort on. So, anyway, I'm glad to talk about risk at any time. This is kind of just like an intro rant to risk for people who are not used to thinking in terms of risk. But yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to send me a message on LinkedIn or whatever about risk, and I'd be glad to chat.